99.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, 97.5 K248BR in Santa Cruz, and online at kpfa.org. It's 2 p.m. Stay tuned for more special Fun Drive programming.
The following program is pre-recorded.
We're going to bring you a documentary today about the contemporary political movement that we're seeing in our lives today that is meant to address income inequality. And we're going to see it as a movement that actually you could trace to over 100 years ago with a very important historic figure, Eugene Victor Debs. American socialists trace the history of American populism with this man who inspired progressive ideas, from FDR's New Deal to Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. This documentary is an objective but passionate history of the movement as founded and championed by Debs, a movement that continues to have the impact on our lives today. Now, Eugene Victor Debs was born in 1855. He was an American socialist, political activist, trade unionist, and one of the founding members of the Industrial Workers of the World. He was also a perennial presidential candidate. He ran for president 5 times with the Socialist Party of America, including in one time in 1916 running from his jail cell, which he received over 1 million votes while he was in jail because of his opposition to World War I. The documentary is called American Socialist: The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs and is directed by Yael Strom.
On Christmas afternoon, flanked by several socialist comrades, Debs met his brother Theodore at the gates of the Atlanta Penitentiary, where they tearfully embraced each other. In a scene unprecedented at any federal penitentiary, Warden Zerbst had allowed all 2,300 inmates out of their cells to bid Debs farewell. As Debs started his long walk to the waiting car, a roar of deep adulation welled up from the throng.
And I'm sure you've got pictures of when Debs was finally released from prison, of the other prisoners applauding and hugging. He carried that prison. You know, if the franchise had been limited to the penitentiaries of the United States, Debs would have been a 3-term president.
First of all, most Americans, they have no idea what a socialist is. That's the first thing.
You know, generally society and communities that work for the people instead of for profit.
Everybody taking care of one another. So just everybody surviving together instead of, you know, trying to have a little bit of power and making everybody else suffer. So
putting the means of production in the hands of the workers so that they receive the full value of their labor.
I think probably America would be well served by being a democratic social democracy.
This land is your land, and this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. As I went a-walking that ribbon of highway, and I saw above me that in the sky...
The United States is in many ways the most unique capitalist country in the world. From about 1820 to around 1970, for 150 years, the real wages of the American worker went up decade after decade. By real wages, we simply mean whatever you got in money per hour, adjusted for the prices you had to pay. So how much could you really afford with each hour of your pay? That went up for 150 years every decade. There probably is no other capitalist country that delivered such a rising standard of living to its workers. So that even when there was trouble and tension and suffering and injustice, and we've had all that in our country, that has to be seen as occurring together with the following reality. You're talking to a nation of immigrants who go through the trauma of coming from far away, who come to a country where they are told if you work real hard, you will do better than you could have done where you were and than you ever dreamed of being able to do. And for 150 years, this American dream was deliverable to the mass of people. All of that stopped being true in the 1970s. And it had to do with a simple explanation: the end of the labor shortage. We developed in the 1970s the computer industry, which wiped out huge numbers of jobs, because the computer does that. We also had corporations who wanted to make more money and found workers much cheaper in other parts of the world because they hadn't had rising wages like we had here, and capitalists reward rising wages by leaving.
Before the Civil War, America was a predominantly rural country. But by the turn of the 20th century, it had become an industrialized nation with lightning speed, with the growth of mining, steel, oil, timber, transportation, communications, and banking. Between the years 1890 to 1912, national wealth increased from $65 billion to $187 billion. But this economic boom was not shared by all who helped to build it. America had a new tier, a group small in numbers but powerful in its control of wealth. 2% of the nation's population owns 60% of the nation's wealth. One man who understood the gross inequality between the working class and the rich and was able to communicate it best in his folksy manner was Eugene Victor Debs. Terre Haute, Indiana, became known as the crossroads of America in the last part of the 19th century. Terre Haute's bustling commercial activity, congenial neighborhoods, and thriving churches attracted many immigrants, including Jean Danielle and Marguerite Debs. It was there on November 5th of that year that their third child, Eugene Victor Debs, was born.
Debs grew up in Terre Haute, Indiana. I always like to remember the fact that he was named after two great French social realist novelists, Eugene Sue and Victor Hugo. So his parents had a social conscience. They understood the larger world and how important that was to the individual.
Debs and his sister's education was supplemented by their father's reading to them every night before bedtime in French. Debs' favorite book to be read to was Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Debs left school at the age of 14. With the help of an old family friend from Alsace, he got a job scraping paint and grease for the Vidalia Railroad at 50 cents a day. Just a year later, in 1871, Debs was promoted to fireman in the switching yards, and soon after, as a fireman on the trains running between Terre Haute and Indianapolis.
The formation of his character and of his political vision really is grounded in that small community of Terre Haute, Indiana. Had a close connection with the president of the local railroad because his father, who was a greengrocer and the local railroad, William Riley McKean, they were friends. From his mom, he learned, he says, the core of his soul of a sense of compassion. Terre Haute really exuded that democratic culture based on an understanding that the work one did became a way of not only contributing to the community, but the quality of one's work was in fact the way in which your standing was rooted and grounded in the community.
I think that ethic really animated Debs throughout his entire life. He started out just seeing this in terms of being an individual. During the 1877 railroad strikes, he did not side with the working class. He sided with Riley McKean, this railroad entrepreneur who was very well known in Terre Haute. That was his hero. So he still thought in terms of individualism. as opposed to working class solidarity.
On June 9th of 1885, Debs married Catherine Kate Metzel, the stepdaughter of the prominent and successful druggist John Jacob Bauer.
Kate married an up-and-coming politician. They marry at exactly the moment when Debs is in the middle of a transition he probably wasn't even aware of in terms of its full span of where he was going at that time. And so the result was that their marriage was, in a sense, they were each standing on two separate boulders from the very beginning. And she began to express her discontent very early on.
Kate kept a beautiful home and nursed her husband when he came home exhausted by his constant traveling, organizing, and speaking. She tried to be his secretary and share in her husband's work. 5 years after they married, with money from an inheritance, Kate purchased an ostentatious large home in a fashionable neighborhood of Terre Haute. Kate took great pains to furnish the house lavishly, but a house is not a home. Debs was uncomfortable in these luxurious surroundings, and this extravagance didn't sit well with his colleagues and associates.
And I think the turning point for Debs occurred in the late 1880s and early 1890s. And it was at that point that the large railroad corporations, which had accepted collective bargaining in the 1870s and throughout most of the 80s, but with the sharpening of competition, especially in the West, and with limitations on their profits, they began to turn against collective bargaining, and they began to pull back on some of the benefits that had been negotiated by the railroad brotherhoods.
On June 20th, 1893, Debs and other dissident railroad labor leaders who shared Debs' disillusionment with the BLF organized the American Railway Union. The ARU was quick to recruit thousands of workers in its first few months. In 1867, George Pullman started a company that manufactured sleeping cars and operated them under contract to the railroads. In order to increase and control production, Pullman situated his plant on a 3,000-acre tract of land south of Chicago, which he named Pullman City. He provided housing, churches, water, and cemeteries for his employees, all of whom were required to live in Pullman City. He deducted weekly wages for the rent of their homes, charged them for the use of the water, groceries, and for the rent of the churches. As the socialist newspaper, The Call, wrote in an editorial, "He wasn't a man to let you pray for free." By May 11th, 1894, 3,000 Pullman workers went on a wildcat strike without authorization of their union. Many of the strikers belonged to the American Railroad Union, founded by Debs.
Recently, I have experienced the erosion of much of this national pride and witnessed amongst the great common people the fear that serfdom awaited them in the near future. Courts are granting injunctions that leave about the same freedom blacks enjoyed up to the Civil War. The power of the law is used to take from one man and give to another. N.R. Piper, Kenton, Ohio.
That June 26th, ARU members refused to allow any train with a Pullman car to move, with the exception of mail cars. Debs did not want federal troops to get involved, and he knew they would be sent in immediately if there was any tampering with the U.S. mail. The strike suddenly took a turn for the worse. Strikers took matters into their own hands, derailing a locomotive, destroying the yards, and setting fire to anything that moved. This action led Attorney General Onley to call for an injunction forcing the strikers to go back to work. He accused Debs and the American Railway Union of interfering with mail delivery and hindering interstate commerce, thereby violating the Sherman Antitrust Act. That afternoon, Debs looked out his hotel window and immediately called his brother Theodore to come and look.
Those fellows aren't militiamen, they're regulars. Cleveland has sent the troops in.
Debs is a giant figure, and he was the leader of the union, and he judged that strike would be defeated. Nevertheless, he pulled his people out in support of the Pullman workers. You know, that there's some things you don't betray. And I think that kind of solidity and spine characterized Debs's entire career.
That's an excerpt from a documentary film called American Socialist, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs, a film produced and directed by Yale Strom. It lasts about 97 minutes. You're listening to KPFA in Berkeley and KFCF in Fresno, and I'm Mitch Jeserich coming to you from the studios of KPFA. We are in the middle of a short end-of-the-year fund drive. These fund drives we do about 4 times a year as we come to you asking you for your financial support in order to keep this community broadcasting radio station on the air and all the things that you hear throughout the day and even the things we do off-air, including all the training programs we have and events in which we bring authors and activists and a whole lot more folks who come from around the country, from around the world to interact with our listeners here in the Bay Area. We're very happy to be able to play excerpts of this documentary film because Eugene Victor Debs, one of those incredibly important American historic figures that most people don't know about. Now, I do suspect many of our listeners know about Eugene Victor Debs, but imagine folks who don't listen to KPFA. Imagine folks that aren't running in your little progressive circles. And, you know, most people actually don't know who Eugene Victor Debs is. And you can, in some ways, say Eugene Victor Debs was on one hand, the Ralph Nader of his time, running for president 5 separate times, including one time from his jail cell because of his opposition to World War I and his encouraging people of avoiding the draft and not adhering to the draft. He was arrested, put in jail, and kept there. I think I said that was his 1916 run before. I actually think it was 1920. I might have been off on that one. So in some ways, he was the perennial third party presidential candidate running with the Socialist Party of America. And so some ways he was like the Ralph Nader of his time. Some ways like the Bernie Sanders of his time. Bernie Sanders certainly draws deeply on the tradition and the story and the life of Eugene Victor Debs today. So Bernie Sanders also very much fits in that mold. This is a documentary film that we are very happy to be able to offer you as our thank you gift to you, our way of saying thank you for your support of KPFA Radio for a pledge of $100. So you can donate $100 and we will send this to you in the mail that you'll have on DVD. It's full of archival footage that obviously you will not get on the radio, but you'll be able to watch. It's something that you could share with people. It's great history, something we all need to know about. You can also get it by becoming a sustainer to KPFA. If you would pledge and dedicate $10 every month to KPFA, much cheaper than a cable bill, internet bill, or anything else, $10 a month to KPFA, and we will also send you this documentary, American Socialist, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs. You can make that contribution by giving us a call at 1-800-439-5732. 1-800-439-5732 and online at kpfa.org. This is the statement from the director Yale Strom about this film. 100 years ago, populism in America was based on progressive and moral ideals. What happened? American Socialist, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs is the culmination of 5 years of research and production. This is an objective but passionate history of the American Socialist movement as championed and co-founded by Eugene Victor Debs, a movement that continues to have an impact on our daily lives today. He goes on to say, my inspiration began during the 2008 election cycle when the word socialist became popular among political pundits as an epithet, and those reacting decried the threat of socialism as they enjoyed the benefits of programs like Social Security and Medicare, both ideas that began with Eugene Victor Debs and were adopted by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The word socialist remains an insult and an epithet in today's political landscape. This film defines the word, the history behind it, and its contemporary relevance. Again, that is from the director, Yale Strom, who took 5 years to make this documentary film. The phone number again is 1-800-439-5732. 1-800-439-5732 and online at kpfa.org. We now turn to another excerpt of American Socialist, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs.
On August 2nd, 1894, the strike officially ended and the Pullman Company reopened. At its peak, the strike involved 250,000 strikers across 27 states and had ended with 30 strikers killed and 50 more wounded by federal troops. On July 10th, 1894, Debs and the rest of the American Railway Union board members were charged with conspiracy. On January 5th, 1895, Debs reported to McHenry County Jail at Woodstock, Illinois, 50 miles northwest of Chicago, to serve his 6-month term for violating the federal court injunction handed down during the Pullman strike. While Debs was in the Woodstock jail, he wrote a series of letters which were published in the daily press.
It is time that organized labor should learn the power and the imperative necessity of a united ballot. And in this is meant the ballot of all who work for their daily bread, without regard to color or sex. It is also high time that allegiance to parties who make laws for the protection of capitalists and the subjugation of labor should be abandoned.
Debs begins to think very seriously about socialism, not as this outgrowth of the worldview of skilled workers, but socialism as something that is an historical development and that is a larger system, a whole way of reorganizing society. And he learns this from Karl Marx. Victor Berger, who would later become such a great figure along with Debs in the Socialist Party, brings to Debs Das Kapital. And Debs reads it. And Debs begins to think very seriously about this. When he comes out, he's not quite a socialist yet, but it's something that's churning in his mind. And he's thinking about it very seriously.
Upon his release, Debs went to Battery D on the shores of Lake Michigan and spoke to the thousands awaiting him. It was November 22nd, 1895.
For the first time in the records of all the ages, the inalienable rights of man, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were proclaimed July 4th, 1776. It was then that crowns, scepters, thrones, and the divine right of kings to rule sunk together, and man expanded to glorious liberty and sovereignty. It means that the people are aroused in view of impending perils and that agitation, organization, and unification are to be the future battle cries of men who will not part with their birthrights and, like Patrick Henry, will have the courage to exclaim, "Give me liberty or give me death."
For the workers, Debs the man had been transformed into Debs the prophet. As J.A. Wayland, the publisher of the most popular socialist newspaper at that time, Appeal to Reason, said,
Debs is a type of man to be honored. In all the ages of the world, such men have been crucified, burned, hanged, and murdered by the ruling powers of despotism, such as now control this nation. When the future historian chronicles this period, the name of Debs will be a great central figure.
Well, I sort of grew up with Eugene Debs as a household god. My parents met in the socialist movement. They were a little too old to have voted for Debs, but they voted for Norman Thomas every time they had a chance, right up through 1948. Then they started voting Democratic with Adlai Stevenson in 1952. My dad was a Socialist Party militant by the age of 12. Instead of a bar mitzvah, he had a soapbox on street corners in the Bronx, giving in his high-pitched then voice little socialist speeches. In fact, when my dad went off to Madison, Wisconsin to go to college, he was given a testimonial dinner by the Bronx Socialist Party. Of course, what a socialist meant to him and to many American socialists had nothing to do with gulags or slave labor or an overweening government that controls every aspect of your life. It was really just one step further to democracy.
Victor Luitpold-Berger was a founding member of the Social Democratic Party of America, and in 1901, co-founder with Debs of its successor, the Socialist Party of America. Berger was a powerful intellect, but did not possess the same astute skill Debs had for speaking to the workers without any notes. J.A. Wayland, the Appeal to Reason editor, expressed what Debs felt.
There should be but one class of people, a working class, men and women doing useful things required for a high state of civilization.
Debs understood that in order to galvanize the American workers, he had to take a more traditional American approach to spreading the message of socialism. While giving a speech in New Jersey, he did so succinctly.
What is socialism? Merely Christianity in action. It recognizes the equality in men. Cain was the author of the competitive theory, while the cross of Jesus stands as its eternal denial.
Debs continued to support as many strikes as his health would allow. From Leadville, Colorado to Fairmont, West Virginia, in support of the coal miners and to hundreds more in between. Debs galvanized men and women strikers and became the hero of tens of thousands of workers. By 1900, Debs was the most important personality nationwide in the fledgling socialist movement. For 10 months, Debs toured practically nonstop to raise money for the American Railway Union debt and proselytize for socialism. In September of 1900, a well-rested Debs accepted the nomination in Chicago and embarked on a 6-week campaign tour across the country. It was during this campaign, Debs became one of the foremost orators of the day. Tall, gaunt, simple, and modest, he bore more than a passing resemblance of Abraham Lincoln. John Swinton, the noted New York Times journalist who had heard Lincoln speak at Cooper Union in New York City, had this to say upon hearing Debs 30 years later.
Good It seemed to me that both men were imbued with the same spirit. Both seemed to me as men of judgment, reason, earnestness, and power. Both seemed to me as men of free, high, genuine, and generous manhood. I took to Lincoln in my early life as I took to Debs a third of a century later.
My dearest Theo, the campaign and the results show that we got everything except votes. I am serene for two reasons. First, I did the very best I could for the party that nominated me for its principles. Second, the working class will get, in full measure, what they voted for. And so we begin the campaign for 1904.
Most Americans in 1900 were hesitant to embrace socialism because they associated it with European class relations. So he focused his attention on the utopian socialists of the antebellum era who mixed political rhetoric, abolitionist fervor, communal living, and love of literature. Debs often spoke of Ralph Waldo Emerson, Horace Greeley, and Henry David Thoreau. Debs knew socialism had to be seen through American historical and religious values.
I like the 4th of July. It breathes the spirit of revolution. On this day, we affirm the ultimate triumph of socialism.
In the span of a single post-Civil War generation, the 1890 census reported that 1% of the total population owned more of the nation's wealth than the remaining 99% of citizens combined. The 99% faced daily struggles for economic survival. Many were learning the ABCs of socialism from Julius Wayland's socialist weekly newspaper, Appeal to Reason. Wayland's editorials dispelled the misperception that socialism was atheistic, anti-individualistic, or opposed to American traditions. In 1897, he and his editor, Fred Warren, moved Appeal to Reason to Girard, Kansas. From 1895 to 1922, the newspaper began to publish many of the leading literary luminaries of the socialist movement, including Jack London, Mother Jones, Upton Sinclair, Helen Keller, and Eugene Debs. In 1904, Appeal to Reason commissioned Upton Sinclair to write a novel about immigrant workers in the Chicago meatpacking houses. Sinclair's novel, The Jungle, debuted in 1905 as a serial in Appeal to Reason. By 1910, it had a weekly circulation of 550,000, and during political campaigns and crises, single-issue printings reached as high as 4,100,000 copies, a world record at that time.
What a great history. This is an excerpt from the documentary American Socialists, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs, directed by Yale Strom. It's a 97-minute documentary film that explores the life and times of Eugene Victor Debs, a perennial presidential candidate between around maybe 1906 to 1920, prominent member of the World Socialist Party, or the Socialist Party of America. He was also a founding member of the Industrial Workers of the World, and somebody that many people over the years have taken great inspiration from Ralph Nader to Bernie Sanders. And of course, Richard Wolff is in this documentary as well. Friends, want to let you know that KPFA is in the middle of its end-of-the-year fund drive, the time of year we come to you asking for a financial contribution so that we can keep this radio station on the air. What we're doing today is we are featuring this documentary film, American Socialists, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs, as a thank you gift to you for a contribution this hour of $100. You donate $100 to KPFA, and we will send you in the mail this documentary, American Socialist. You can also get it by becoming a sustainer of $10 or more a month to KPFA. That means every month you would donate $10 to KPFA, and in return, we will also, again, we will send you this documentary film, American Socialist: The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs. Such important history. The phone number to make that contribution is 1-800-439-5732, 1-800-439-5732, and online at kpfa.org. Again, it is the end of the year fund drive. And the way that this radio station has always operated, going back to 1949, is by asking listeners who could otherwise get it for free to donate what they can according to what they can. Look, we can still accept and be very happy to accept a $25 contribution or a $50 contribution. If you do $100, well, our thank you gift, we will send you this as a thank you gift. We also got socks. We got water bottles, bags with KPFA logo on it, sweatshirts. We got all kinds of things you could talk to our phone room volunteers about that we're also offering in this fund drive. And we do have a number of people in our phone room right now who are donating their time and their labor to KPFA, doing their part. You can honor them as well by doing your part, by giving us a call and making a contribution that you can afford. 1-800-439-5732. 1-800-439-5732 and online at kpfa.org. You know, something I think that is really important is, as we've seen this shift in opinions about socialism here really since the economic recession of 2007, 2008 and its aftermath, we have seen a shift that has made a presidential candidacy like somebody from Bernie Sanders, who I understand is actually in the latest poll leading in the state of California. And California is a big deal. We possess the most delegates in the nominating process, and we have been moved up in the voting schedule this year. So we're not going to be an afterthought by the time next year in the primaries. We're going to be voting in March. I think aren't we like part of Super Tuesday? It's really important. The fact that Bernie Sanders, a self-described socialist who doesn't even register with the party, though he is running as to be the Democratic nominee and has always caucused with Democrats in Congress. Still, nonetheless, if you go look in his bio, go look, go to the members section of Congress online, and you'll see he's still registered as an independent. The fact that somebody who's a self-proclaimed lifelong socialist who has never wavered from it is now leading in California in the polls is really remarkable. And who's number two? Elizabeth Warren. So the fact that those are the two, number one and two, leading folks in the polls at this point for such an important state about California really tells us we are in a different political moment, different political time that can produce something like a President Donald Trump and that can bring us fascist trends, but at the same time, it produces this other possible outcome of somebody running for president as a socialist. So it's this really important moment in time we're living through right now. But I think the importance of this documentary film about Eugene Victor Debs is that there is a history of American socialism. There is a history of socialist politics in this country. And you see that with this documentary about Eugene Victor Debs. A really important film, I would say, that you may want to share with folks in these months ahead. So the phone number again is 1-800-439-5732, 1-800-439-5732, and online at kpfa.org. We now turn to another excerpt of the documentary film, American Socialists, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs.
At your request, I will give my reasons for voting the socialist ticket this fall. I am a farmer. 2 years ago, I was a Republican. I learned by reading the government's reports 50 years prior to 1904 that the working people of the United States owned 67% of the wealth of the United States. And in 1904, they only owned 10%. I figured from this that in less than 50 years from 1904, under the present form of government unmolested, the working man would not own anything. A reformed government being our only hope from capitalistic slavery, I joined the Socialist Party, heart and soul. W.H. Nichols, Boswell, Oklahoma.
We socialists are marching around the wall of Jericho. And on election day, we will sound the trumpet that will fail this wall and drive capitalism to hell from whence it came from. Dan Gandy, Hallettsville, Texas, January 13, 1908.
The tour's most spectacular meeting was in New York City's Hippodrome. Over 7,500 people paid admission to hear Debs, while another 2,500 who could not get in waited patiently for Debs to greet them afterwards.
President Gompers believes that the interest of labor and capital are identical or mutual. We do not. He believes that these interests can be harmonized and justice done to both. We do not. We believe that labor is entitled to all it produces, and that labor must organize politically as well as economically to abolish the existing order.
This was the final straw for Gompers, who in turn denounced Debs as the apostle of failure in the AFL publication. This was also the first presidential election when any party appealed for the African American vote. Debs did not specifically tackle the problem of segregation, but treated the race problem in America in a broader framework of worker versus master, poor versus rich. Debs's attitude was considerably more favorable to African Americans than most socialists, and he insisted they were entitled to the full products of their labor with economic equality.
I am a woman and cannot vote. I am compelled to pay taxes which I have no voice in appropriating. I must obey laws that I do not help to make. I would vote the socialist ticket this fall if I could, because socialism would give me the same privileges as all other citizens, and because air, water, land, and all necessaries of life should be free, publicly owned. A.E. Farham, Russell, Minnesota.
Unfortunately, the Socialist Party's million votes never materialized. The Socialists still retain their place as the third party of American politics, showing their greatest strength in the Midwest and Far West, and substantial increases in the coal mining regions of Pennsylvania and throughout Wisconsin and Oklahoma. In 1910, socialist candidates received over 700,000 votes for state and local offices throughout the nation. By 1912, the party reported its highest membership at 118,000, an increase of 40%. From New York to St. Mary's, Ohio, from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho to Berkeley, California, socialists were elected and working on behalf of their local working constituents. 1912 would prove to be an especially chaotic year for the Socialist Party, and the focal point was Lawrence, Massachusetts. In 1912, approximately 60,000 residents out of a total population of 86,000 depended directly upon the payrolls of the textile mills. Work in the mills was hard and dangerous, and families who had to make ends meet sent their children into the mills at an early age. Living conditions for these workers were horrendous. Wages were poor, housing horribly overcrowded, and the life expectancy of textile workers in New England was the lowest in the nation. Massachusetts had passed a law requiring a shorter work week. The law reduced the maximum weekly work hours for women and children from 56 to 54 hours. Lawrence's textile mill owners responded by reducing workers' wages by 3.5%. The average male worker earned $8.76 a week, while the average woman and child earned $6 a week. On January 11, 1912, a group of Polish female textile workers from the Everett cotton mills quit their looms when they received the unannounced wage cut. The next day, Italian workers left their jobs at the American Woolen Company, and by nightfall, the total reached 23,000.
Employers cannot weave cloth from the bayonets of the soldiers, so keep your hands in your pockets, and we will wait out the bosses.
On March 12th, After 10 weeks of strikers marching in the extreme cold and enduring clubbing and water hosing by the police and state militia, the mill owners agreed to wage increases of 5% for the highest paid workers and 20% for the lowest paid. Debs was nominated as the Socialist Party presidential candidate at the Indianapolis Convention in May of 1912. Emil Seidel, the socialist mayor from Milwaukee, was his running mate.
And so what is really fascinating to me about Debs is the way in which, even as he lost folks, as he transformed himself, what really was consistent was two things, and it served the basis of this widening appeal. One was that his values rooted in that democratic culture and his demand that precisely to be viable in an era of corporate capitalism, it has to extend to the economic sphere. And what is really amazing is the way in which, as a socialist, in 1912, for example, he received 6% of the popular vote. He's not going to challenge Wilson or Woodrow Wilson or Teddy Roosevelt in that election, or Taft for that matter either. But that's a significant, some 1 million voters who are saying, we want to explore a different way of constructing this new society.
Well, what Debs and the Socialist Party thought was the breakthrough moment, 1912, when the party got nearly 1 million votes and 6% of the total. Well, that turned out to be the high point, and it was all downhill from there. But I think they got more than was counted, because that was just the votes that were counted. A lot of Socialist Party ballots just went right into the trash. So I think they probably got 10%.
Wow. I'm really finding this documentary interesting as it goes along. You are listening to American Socialist, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs, perennial presidential candidate in the early 20th century of the Socialist Party of America. Also a founding member of the Industrial Workers of the World, the Wobblies, and just his legacy here, going all the way up into today's politics. Friends, we're going to get back to this documentary in just a moment, but I wanted to let you know that we have a fellow listener, Dave in Shorewood, Minnesota, must be listening to KPFA, has called in a $480 challenge, but has made it conditional. What that means, if we can raise an additional $480 between now and the top of the hour, that would be $960 for this hour. And what a great opportunity to get your hands on this documentary on DVD full of archival footage that you will not find anywhere else. American Socialist, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs. The phone number is 1-800-439-5732, 1-800-439-5732. Of course, you can also pledge online at kpfa.org. This challenge begins now, and you could double your donation. We have 5 individuals going to their phones between now and the top of the hour, pledging $100, getting this documentary. You can also do it on the installment plan, $10 a month to KPFA. We will also send you this documentary film as a thank you gift. Double your donation if collectively we could raise this $480. The phone number, 1-800-439-5732, 1-800-439-5732, online at kpfa.org. Back to the film.
Despite the home rest and continuing osteopathic treatments, Debs remained fragile both physically and mentally, forcing him to cancel his lecture tour in the West for the month of September. Instead, he went to a sanitarium in Estes Park, Colorado, from October into the middle of November.
My dear old pard, heavy frost last night and every night. Wish you were here. Had but one thought here. That is to get well and strong and want you to do the same. Don't write much, nor will I. When I get home, we'll make things hum. But we can't do it as corpses. Dead men cut sad figures in live roles. You old hound, I shall beat you to a pulp on sight. Kisses to you and Gertrude and Marguerite. October 2nd, 1913, Estes Park, Colorado.
Following the outbreak of war in Europe in August 1914, American socialists found themselves divided again, this time over whether those socialists committed to internationalism could support their country in a war. 1915 found Debs faced with three major challenges. Would he accept the Socialist Party's 1916 presidential nomination for a record fifth time? Could he convince all Americans that getting involved in World War I was completely wrong? And most pressing, how could he help to overturn the wrongful murder conviction against Joe Hill? Joe Hillstrom was born in Gavle, Sweden, and immigrated to the United States in 1902, where he shortened his name to Hill. He was a migrant laborer, moving from New York City to Cleveland, Ohio, and eventually to San Pedro, California, to find work on the docks. He rose in the IWW's ranks and traveled widely, organizing workers under the IWW banner, writing political songs and satirical poems, and making speeches. People at Wobbly, socialist and union meetings all over the country sang his songs like The Rebel Girl, in honor of Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, and The Preacher and the Slave, in which he coined the phrase pie in the sky. In January of 1914, Hill was arrested in Salt Lake City for the murder of a grocer and his wife. He was tried and convicted, and for the next 17 months languished in prison, while a massive campaign to secure a new trial for him gained momentum. The Swedish government, President Wilson, Samuel Gompers, Helen Keller, and countless others joined the campaign. But Utah's Governor William Spry denied him a new trial. Hill wrote a letter to the Salt Lake Telegram.
I never killed Morrison and do not know a thing about it. This is the only fact worth considering. I've worked hard for a living and paid for everything I got. And my spare time I spend by painting pictures, writing songs, and composing music. Now, if the people of the state of Utah want to shoot me without giving me half a chance to state my side of the case, then bring on your firing squads. I am ready for you. I have lived like an artist, and I shall die like an artist. Respectfully yours, Joe Hillstrom.
Dear Governor Spry, please allow me to say a word in behalf of Joseph Hillstrom. He was convicted upon circumstantial evidence, denied the right to choose his own counsel, while at the same time there was unquestionably a strong prejudice against him on account of his activity in the labor movement. I am confident you will grant him executive clemency. Joe Hill is not a murderer. He is a man, and the great state of Utah, where murder is so abhorred, cannot afford to take his life. I remain yours very truly, Eugene V. Debs, August 20th, 1915, Terre Haute, Indiana.
Joe Hill wrote to Bill Haywood.
Goodbye, Bill. I die like a true blue rebel. Don't waste any time in mourning. Organize. Could you arrange to have my body hauled to the state line to be buried? I don't want to be found dead in Utah.
Hill was executed by firing squad on November 19th, 1915.
Pretty touching to hear about the story of Joe Hill and how it was connected to that of Eugene Victor Debs. And of course, this documentary is called American Socialist, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs. Friends, a quick update on that $480 challenge. At the moment, we've raised $100 towards that $480 challenge. If we can raise an additional $380, it would mean doubling that donation that came in from Dave in Shorewood, Minnesota. For a pledge of $100, our thank you gift is this entire documentary, 97 minutes long, American Socialist, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs. The archival footage is amazing. The way that that they are able to dramatize some of these stories over the past, and what important history, our very own history, yours for a pledge of $100. You can also get it by becoming a sustainer by pledging $10 a month to KPFA. The phone number is 1-800-439-5732. 1-800-439-5732 and online at kpfa.org. This is the end of the year fund drive for KPFA. It's an important time for us to be able to raise the money to make sure that we will be on the air over just the next couple of months. We are truly a radio station. You know the saying, paycheck to paycheck existence. Well, we are a fund drive to fund drive kind of existence. Each fund drive determines whether or not we'll actually be able to get to the next one and do the type of broadcasting we do in between. So this is where the rubber hits the road, right? This is very much a part of this great tradition of American public broadcasting that you can make the argument began at KPFA back in 1949, knowing that there are people to support something on air that you know you can get for free. It's important that it remains free for everyone who needs it, regardless of their ability to be able to make a contribution. But that, in order for that to work, it is dependent on folks who can make that contribution to KPFA to support this radio station today to do so. Today, we have this great thank you gift for you, American Socialist, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs, for a pledge of $100 or become a sustainer of $10 a month to KPFA. 1-800-439-5732, 1-800-439-5732, and online at kpfa.org. We have 2 minutes to go, trying to raise $480 to double a challenge that came in from Dave in Shorewood, Minnesota. $480 challenge, right? So that's a lot of money. Dave's saying, here's $480. I want to donate it, but shoot, I don't want to hand over $480 and not have the radio station be there next month, right? That's not a wise investment. So it's community radio. So Dave is doing what he can. He's saying, hey, here's $400. I could do it. But let's see if there's other folks who maybe could pledge $100, $50, $25, whatever it may be. Let's see, this is a radio station, right? You broadcast throughout the entire Bay Area and the Central Valley. I would suspect there would be another 5 people who could pledge $100 or 10 people who could pledge $50 or, you could do the math to match this. And you could do that. Together, we'll raise $960. Very much what we need. The phone number is 1-800-439-5732, 1-800-439-5732, and online at kpfa.org. We are now $275 towards that $480 challenge. We are $205 away. 2 individuals really going for this important documentary, a history that's very much about now as it is then. American Socialist, The Life and Times of Eugene Victor Debs. The phone number, 1-800-439-5732, 1-800-439-5732, online at kpfa.org. 3 people calling in right now. We may make it if they're all doing the $100 rate, but we don't know. You can help Buzz know for sure by becoming the 4th caller, 1-800-439-5732, or online at kpfa.org. Thank you.
Amended and restated Pacifica bylaws amendments have been proposed and may now be found on the Foundation's website at www.pacifica.org for review and have been voted on by the Pacifica National Board and are to be voted on by the station delegates, followed by a membership vote.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our loyal listeners who continue to amaze us. You keep KPFA from yielding, sinking, or losing our courage to be truly independent. You bolster and sustain us. No other public radio station can truly say this and know it's true, that we are proudly listener-supported. Thanks again from all of us here at KPFA.
Richard Wolff has just published a new book, Understanding Socialism. It destroys false narratives, confronts historic failures, reveals the way to a fresh socialism based on workplace democracy. Cornel West says Wolff's new book is the most accessible, reliable treatment we have of what socialism is, was, should be. Laura Sanders says it explains socialism in a way that's not only smart, but makes the rest of us feel smart. Chris Hedges says Wolff provides a sane and just socialist alternative to capitalist exploitation. Richard Wolff will discuss this new book Friday evening, February 28th at First Church, Berkeley, 2407 Dana Street. There's wheelchair access. Sabrina Jacobs will host this benefit for KPFA and Democracy at Work. Tickets at brownpapertickets.com or supportive bookstores.
KPFA, KPFB Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, 97.5 K248BR in Santa Cruz, and online at kpfa.org.